What's up, everybody? My name is Markel Henry, and today we're going to be talking about something real. We're going to be talking about life. And no, I'm not talking about the movie with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. I'm talking about how we move through the past, present, and future, and what it really looks like for us to catch up in the middle of the biggest shift. When I say the biggest, this is the biggest shift in history, the fourth industrial revolution. And so, right now, what I mean by that is we have AI, robotics, quantum computing, and even biotech, plus more, which are all revolutionizing every part of our lives, from healthcare to education to finance, food service. We've got robots flipping burgers now, algorithms writing stories and music, and even diagnosing diseases. They're literally taking apart, taking control of every part of our lives. We even got dolls for our personal entertainment and pleasure. And that's a whole different story. But they're taking jobs. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, who jobs are these robots going to be taking? And the more important question is, who's owning these robots? Who are the ones programming these robots? And so, we're going to get into that later in this video, but let's go back in the past. In the Khan tradition, there's a powerful symbol called Sankofa. And what it means is to go back and fetch it. So, go back, retrieve whatever that may look like for you. The idea is that we must look back, learn from our past, in order to move forward with wisdom and power. So let's take a step back and look at this history. When we see some of these big shifts in the industries, we have to acknowledge that not everyone has been brought along for the ride. When I say not everyone, I mean the people that look like me and most of my people are going to be watching this, my brothers and my sisters, my black and brown people. We have been left behind in major transformations in the past. When you're thinking about it, when you think about the first and second industrial revolution, black Americans were excluded from land ownership, skilled trades, and industrial jobs. There was systemic racism, still is, Jim Crow laws, and the deliberate suppression of wealth accumulation. Even looking back, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Black Wall Street, but that's something you guys need to look up. It was burnt down. We were getting money, but they hate us because they hate us. But so yeah, back to the topic for real. The same story repeated itself with the rise of the Silicon Valley during the tech boom. While massive wealth was being created, black entrepreneurs and technologists were shut out. We were denied venture capital, networks, and education pipelines. But now we're here, and we're standing on the threshold of the fourth revolution. This one is about artificial intelligence, digital literacy, and software. Things that's going to shape the future. Robert F. Smith, the richest black man, not one of the richest, the richest black man in America. He talks about this in the Earn Your Leisure podcast, and he says, software is the new literacy. The market is moving so fast, and that those who are not digitally literate, they will be locked out of opportunities. So we gotta become literate in these things. If black and brown students aren't trained for the future in the next 8 to 20 years, they won't be able to catch up. The market will have moved too far ahead. So what do we do? What needs to be done? What's going to happen? So one thing, we need educators, trainers, creators, but more importantly, we need owners of this future. But you got to start somewhere. And another Dr. Joanne Rowe, Dean of School of Business at City University of New York, she also said something powerful. We don't have access to broadband. We're not part of the economy of tomorrow, you know. And it's a life opportunity gap. So let that sink in. We're not just talking about internet access. We're talking about economic survival. This is about surviving, do or die at this point, if I may. And so right now in urban neighborhoods, rural towns, reservations, these are places where high-speed internet is either non-existent or too expensive. And these are called broadband deserts. They're hidden in the crisis. This is a hidden crisis. Not so many people know about this. You know, and an example of this would be like, maybe you can't join a Zoom class. You can't submit a college application. You can't build a Shopify store or take an online coding boot camp without access to broadband. It's basically having Wi-Fi, having network, having the access to access online. Having the access to watch this video to learn these important things I'm about to tell you today. You know, it's a new form of digital redlining. We've gone from being denied land to being denied bandwidth. Without broadband, there's no future economy. It's as simple as that. And so what do we do about it? So here are some moves we can make. We can close to help close this gap and catch up. We got to educate our communities in digital literacy. We need more coding boot camps, AI courses, and data science certifications. So we got to flood these spaces with talent. And, it is not going to be easy at all, because if it was easy, then everybody would do it. But you see, we're lacking a lot of black and brown people in these spaces. Even for me, I took a computer programming class my freshman year in undergrad. We were doing C++ and some Python, some of those things. And I had to drop the class, because it wasn't easy. I had to pivot, but after learning a lot about this, it definitely makes me want to get back into it and look back into it to learn some more. But don't be like me. Let's get you guys started early and get you guys going. Second, we got to advocate for broadband equity. Push for universal broadband access at every level of the government. Without access to internet, people are locked out of the future. I've said that a couple times throughout this video. And we got to create pipelines from HBCUs to community colleges, grassroots organizations into these tech careers. This isn't just about jobs. This is about wealth. These careers are where the money is, and we need to be a part of it. We got to own the tools. We need more Black-owned tech platforms, venture capital, AI labs, and innovation hubs. If we're not building it, we're simply just watching it happen from the sideline. We got to be doers in this world. We also got to pour into our young people. Tell them the truth. We're not just consumers of tech. They are the future inventors, investors, and innovators. So we gotta start training them now. The same thing they say with learning the language. You gotta start early. So we gotta start young people early with learning AI, learning coding, because this is another language that's gonna be needed if you want to be great in the future. And so to quote the legendary Gil Scott-Heron, the revolution will not be televised. I repeat, the revolution will not be televised. It will be coded, automated, and digitized. And if we're not coding it, if we're not building it, if we're going to just sit and watch, we're going to be on the sidelines. We're going to get behind when we're already behind. So we can't do that. We can't. But so this is how we create this generational wealth that we always talk about with our families and when we're with our friends. This is how we close the gap between black and brown people in the tech world and stay ahead of the curve. It starts now and it starts with us. And what's that song that Kirk Franklin sings? Oh, 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 oh. I think I got it right here. Oh, 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 oh. Do you want a revolution? Woo, woo, woo. Do you want a revolution? Do you want a revolution? Well, it doesn't matter if you do, because it's here already. The fourth industrial revolution is already here. And some of you guys are already missing it. But that's why this video is here. I'm here to spread the love. Spread the love. And so it's already here. The algorithms are being written. The companies are being built. The future is being coded. The only question is, will we be architects of this future, or will we be artifacts of revolution that passed us by? So let's get to work and let's build it. Simple as that.